Cubs Recap Podcast here on our YouTube channel, The Recap, and available audio only anywhere you get your favorite podcast. This is an emergency podcast because we've got massive news. My partner's Gordon Wittenmeyer. He's at the GM meetings for MLB. I'm David Kaplan. Let's rock and roll and get right into this. This will be the biggest story at the GM meetings because Craig Counsell, who hit free agency last Wednesday, agreed to the biggest per-year salary for a manager in the history of Major League Baseball. David Ross has been fired, and in comes Craig Counsell for a 5-year deal for $40 million. Gordon Wittenmeyer, holy shit.
Wow. So does that make him what? The second or third highest paid Cub right now? Or is he the highest paid Cub?
No, he's not the highest paid Cub, but he's up there. He's getting $8 million a year. And it also signals to me, like it did when Joe Madden came, the Cubs are open for business. They're ready to put the pedal down.
No question. That's exactly what this is, right? It's Joe Madden all over again. You got a guy that became available who, until we got well into this season, probably weren't sure he was going to become available. It certainly didn't. Yeah, we certainly didn't know for sure. And the indications as the season wound down were that for sure he was going to be a free agent. But we thought he was going to go to the Mets, where his old GM went. So once that in fact, the Mets made their hire announcement today. And once that happened, dominoes started falling fast. And that's when we got this news. And it's very much the only difference between this one and the Madden move in its sort of impact in the moment and all that is that it happened so fast. Because Madden became a free agent. And then it was weeks before the Cubs announced it and brought him in to the Cubby Bear for the press conference. And by then, the rumors had been flying for weeks, and we knew it was coming. This was all of a sudden. This was a lightning strike, and I'm with you. The total package is the highest for a manager ever. This is part of what Counsell was supposedly going to be doing by becoming a free agent and putting himself out there this year. Is kind of raising the bar again for managers after years of sort of salary suppression at that spot, and he did it. 8 a year plus the total package. And now Jed got to give him a few more bullets in that chamber for this year. And I think that's what's coming next. They got to get one of these starting pitchers out there on the free agent market, and they got to get some bats.
Yeah. From what I'm being told, look, they're never going to be George Steinbrenner and just will buy every single guy out there. That's just not how they operate. But what I'm being told is Jed feels like they've got the organization to a point, and Tom concurs. It's time to put the pedal down. Let's shift into overdrive. They're going to spend, and the news that we'll get to in a moment that Marcus Stroman opted out, right. They're throwing a freaking party over there. They are
no question. And I've already heard that buzz here just in the first day at the GM meetings. I mean, the Rossi move, sent people scurrying all over the place, tracking stuff down, writing stories, and then just the people in the industry buzzing over this. But also the Marcus Stroman thing. That's exactly what the Cubs hoped for. It was the best case scenario for the Cubs and probably for Stroman because it's going to be a seller's market for starting pitchers. But what it does is his $25 million or whatever plus pretty close to that for Jason Hayward's final year falling off the books. That's almost $50 million that they, in addition to whatever else they were going to increase the budget by and push in on 2024. With the way Justin Steele finished and the way that middle infield looked, 2 Gold Gloves last night, and Ian Happ got another one. They brought Yan Gomes back to handle that pitching staff. You get another starting pitcher, you get another bat, and you get some bullpen help, and that team should be the favorite in that division. It's a lot to ask.
Team, if they do the right things, and I think they will this offseason, and they add starting pitching, bullpen help, they get another really solid bat, and they address third base. They've been linked to Matt Chapman already. If they do those things, they can win the World Series, Gordon.
You know, the fact that the team that snuck into the playoffs by one game over them, the Arizona Diamondbacks, wound up in the World Series, tells you that much, doesn't it? If they get in, and certainly if they get in with a first-round bye because they've won the division with a good record, then I'm with you on that, Cap. Now, there's a lot that has to happen between now and then, because one thing that's going on at these GM meetings and later at the winter meetings in a month is that I was doing kind of the math on this. Like, there's more teams now. There might be as many as 29 teams trying to win next year. Now, that it gets defined a little different market to market, but all the big market teams, especially the ones that were spending money and missed the playoffs this year, they're extra motivated. The big market teams that made the playoffs and fell a little short, they're motivated. And then there's all these teams, the Reds, the Pirates even, and you're just talking about two teams in the Cubs division. Those are teams that expect to win more games next year, and they're going to try to fill gaps rather than just fill roster holes. So that means that, and when I look at that and I say, when was the last time that many teams were trying to win? Even if it's anything close to that, it's probably the late 90s, right before the second expansion, 97-ish, 98? Well, before 98. 25 years ago, man, was probably the last time this many teams was trying to win next year. And most of those are looking for starting pitching. And there's not that many great ones out there in this market. So you're going to see trades, I think, this year. You're going to see more trades than normal this year. And I think you're going to see some salaries get pushed higher than we think for some of these free agents because so many teams are going to be in on them.
Gordon, all the people out there that criticized the Ricketts, Tom Ricketts and his family.
You mean like me?
Yeah, because let me just lay this case out to you. They took over a horrifically bad infrastructure. They won the World Series when everyone said,
why are you apologizing
no
for billionaires?
Pardon me?
Why are you apologizing for billionaires?
I'm not apologizing. I'm laying out the freaking facts. The facts are that they took over a pathetically run organization. He went out and said, I'll get him. And he went and got Theo. Theo won the World Series. And then they went to 3 straight NLCS. I'm not defending every move Tom made because I thought the biblical losses comment was stupid and he never should have made it. I think if he could do it again, he would never say it. But when they traded those dudes all away, it was the right decision, not the popular one, the right decision. And here we are, 2.5 years later, and all of a sudden, whoa, they're thinking World Series, and it's legitimate. So I would think there are people close to him that are going, take that.
They can say that all they want. The fact of the matter is, Cap, that in a lot of the examples you're using, a lot of things you're saying are cases of two things can be right at once. I don't take back anything I've criticized them on. They made a business decision when they bought that team. It was a sound business decision at the time. You could argue that they bought low, and it turns out that they did. Now, whether they knew exactly how low they were buying in, who knows? But they knew they were buying a team that sold 3 million tickets a year and that had a huge media market. They also had their eye on media rights that were, and they kind of miscalculated a little bit on that as they went in.
Did.
But it was a business decision. They made a business decision to make money. They didn't. This isn't about we're so much better than anybody else at running things. They did that, and then they made changes in the front office, and they hired the safest, best pick they could out there, Theo Epstein. All credit to Theo Epstein. He got the job done. He fucking got the job done. And you give him all the credit in the world. You give Ricketts credit for hiring him. But that doesn't mean it was an inspired hire. The guy became available at the right time. You hired him. Great. That's great. That was a smart move. But it's not, that doesn't change any of the other facts. And when you talk about the biblical losses comment, it wasn't just the comment that he made. It was the behavior that followed. And the behavior that followed was a team that ran scared from the pandemic losses instead of holding firm a little bit and maybe withstanding some losses in the short term for, if not goodwill, at least what they knew was coming on the back end. Instead, they were one of a handful of teams that did not look good during the pandemic for what they did to some of their employees and with the organization. the fact that they traded away some of those guys when they did, by the time that happened, you can certainly make the case and probably win an argument that in most of those cases it was the right thing to do. On the other hand, non-tendering Kyle Schwarber over $8 million, which is what his arbitration projection was, and he turns around and it turns out the free agent value for him, the free market value for him was $2 million more than that. That was all about pandemic losses. That was all
Agreed.
about
That was a bad one.
And so a lot of things are. It's not just simply it's all great or it's all terrible. So a lot of things are true at once in this scenario. Now, when we talk about this right now, this is Jed's decision. And you asked me this earlier: should Rossi be fired? And my thought was it was hard. That this was a lot of these questions came during the season, and my thought was the jury's still out a little bit on that because his first 3 seasons were all whacked, right? Pandemic season, pandemic hangover with a lot of the issues, a lot of the testing issues and a lot of attendance issues still hanging there. And then they sold the team out from under him. And then you had the lockout spring, and then you had a rebuild. So it wasn't until this year that you could judge him or probably Jed on the jobs they've done since each one took over. And I told you then, if you're going to fire Rossi, you ought to fire Jed because they're in it together on this. In this case, I'm not sure Rossi would have been fired if Craig Counsell wasn't available, similar to Rick Renneria and Joe Madden. So a little bit different circumstances prevailed. Now he's got to be right. Now this should signal, I think it does, that they're all in, and they need to win these battles now that are going to be highly charged, highly competitive, because it's a seller's market for all the reasons I outlined earlier. The Cubs have to go in and win at least. If they go hard after 3 guys, they better win 2 of them.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. And he was wrong on the Schwarber thing, no doubt about it. He was wrong for the biblical losses comment, but they did what was not popular among the fan base by trading Rizzo, trading Bryant, trading Baez. Those decisions came with a lot of public criticism, and he said it's the right thing for the franchise. Looking back, there is not one of those contracts they regret. Not one. That's a fact.
I mean, and that's where I say you can probably win an argument on that. I mean, we could debate all day long if you want on Rizzo, whether they should have brought him back, given him extra years or whatever. He's done a pretty good job for the Yankees. But yeah, I could, and then we could talk about how some of these played out based on where guys were. And we're not even going to talk about Chris Bryant because we knew he wasn't coming back under any circumstances, and they sure weren't going to give him the money that the Rockies gave him. So again, but those were. I wonder if you're giving ownership too much credit in some of that stuff, because some of those are easy decisions to make for them. They're going to save a lot of money. They already won the World Series. They already made a ton of money off the World Series, and they got guys on the front line bearing the public scrutiny and the public criticism, such as it was, that came with those moves. So from an ownership standpoint, I'm not sure it was so damn courageous or brave. And all I'm doing is, and that's not to criticize ownership. That's just to push back a little on what you're saying.
All right, so what does this say to the rest of baseball that Steve Cohen was very interested in Craig Counsell? That's a fact. David Stearns, his old boss, is the new head of baseball ops in New York. And in the end, whatever it costs, they have now spent the most money by year salary in the history of baseball on a manager. $40 million guaranteed dollars for 5 years. What does that say to the rest of baseball about where the Cubs are now?
Exactly what we've already alluded to. They're all in. They're not a little in. They're all in. Same way they were when they went and got Lester and Madden in that one-off season. So this isn't, and by the way, this isn't a next step to get competitive next year. They were competitive this year. They probably should have made the playoffs this year. This is about trying to win the whole damn thing next year. And with so many playoff spots in play, keep this in mind, man. They've had 2 full seasons with the expanded playoff field, 6 in each league. 3 of the 4 World Series teams in those 2 years have been wild cards. 2 of them were the last teams to qualify. And so that tells you what's in play in these weird 3-game series, then 5-game series before we get into the 7-game series rounds. How volatile that is, how much opportunity there is there compared to what there has been in the past. Some people say that the top seeds should get more of an advantage, and maybe they should look at that. I don't think so. I think this is exactly what the game needs. It is so exciting. It is so thrilling to go into a postseason and not feel like the Braves, who dominated all year long, are necessarily going to win the whole thing, or the Houston Astros that have been to 7 straight LCSs are necessarily going to be in the World Series. And it turns out neither one was this year. I think that's great for baseball. Any number of teams can win it. And that is exactly why so many teams are trying to win next year, feel they have a chance to do something, and why the Cubs absolutely frigging positively should be all in.
Okay, so now that they've made this move, he's not coming here if they said, yeah, we're in a rebuild still and we're really not going to spend. That ain't happening. Like, they're going to address their rotation, their bullpen, and they need star power. They got a star manager. They need star power, whether that is Ohtani, whether that is Juan Soto, whether
they need a left-handed bat.
They do.
Go after Juan Soto.
That would be an amazing, amazing move. Will they do it? Remains to be seen. What's the price? I don't think the money obviously is a factor. It's how much player capital you have to give up. But I would think now, with him taking this job, the rest of baseball's like, the agents are going, hang on a second, I got to call Jed. Because
I think you're right.
There's checkbooks that are going to be used at 1060 West Addison.
Hey, I think it's worth noting, too, right? We've compared this to Madden. And at the time that Madden was hired, I think we both agreed he was probably the best manager at the right time for a team that was going to bring so many young players into the mix, because that's kind of his superpower is transitioning young players into big league players quickly, making them feel like they belong, bringing their skill sets to the surface at the big league level quicker. And it worked, right? But at the time, the $6 million a year he got, I think it was $5 million plus the incentives that kicked in when he won, we're kind of in keeping with what the top managers were getting at the time. That's changed a lot since then. When he left, a lot of the questions about him not being brought back, him being fired, was this about money? Because they were going to turn around and the managers being talked about at the time turned out to be a first-year manager. We're not going to get paid even a quarter of what he got paid. And so, well, is this about money? Is this about cost? And we were told, no, it's not. Okay, that's fine. But that was the industry trend that we've seen happen ever since then. The thing about Counsell is people recognize that even in an era when managers do less than they ever had, they're responsible for less independent decision-making than they ever have been. There are a handful that still make a difference because of the way they deal with their players. Dusty Baker's a classic example of that. Players will run through a wall for him. And that's one of the few things you can still influence as a manager. The way you handle some in-game decisions, and the way you work with the front office, and the way you work with the media. But there's a few managers. Terry Francona was one, just retired. Bruce Bochy's one, just won one of those. He just won a World Series. And as I said, Dusty Baker was one, just retired. Craig Counsell's the other one. You can count them probably on one hand. How many are that good, like stand above and can make a difference as one guy coming into an organization as a manager? Craig Counsell is one of those that you can count on one hand. That's why you make a move like this. And that's why you make sure he's got the players to work with. We've seen what he's done in Milwaukee with less. Now we'll see what he does with more in Chicago.
I just got the release from the Cubs. They just sent this to me. Chicago Cubs today announced that the club has relieved David Ross of his managerial duties. He was the 55th manager in franchise history and managed the club for 4 seasons after replacing Joe Madden. Quote, "Today we made the difficult decision to dismiss David Ross as our major league manager," said Jed Hoyer. "On behalf of the Cubs organization, we express our deep gratitude for David's contributions, both on and off the field, first as a player, then a manager." Going forward, our Major League team will be managed by Craig Counsell. We look forward to welcoming Craig at Wrigley Field early next week. So before we get out of
Hey,
here.
wait. Let me throw one more thing in on Counsell. So he was in discussions with the Mets. The Mets were interested in him. And then when the Mets filled that job early this morning with Mendoza, I believe, it started this domino effect. And a couple of us writers were talking, well, where do you think Counsell's going to go? Right? And then we saw the report he's not going to go to Milwaukee. He's going to go to another team, but not Milwaukee. And then my immediate comment was the Twins or one of the two Chicago teams, because in part he lives in Milwaukee, from that area, has a daughter I think who's about to start at the University of Minnesota, might have another kid there, and so
he loves living in the suburbs of Milwaukee.
Right. And so the reason that he talked about leaving managing at all was this idea of spending more time with his family. So staying in the region mattered. So once he wasn't going to be the Mets manager, this made all the sense in the world. So it's definitely a two-way street here too with Counsell and the Cubs.
No question about it. So before I let you go, if we start to think pie in the sky, and again, they're not going to spend stupid money, $500 million. I don't see it on Ohtani.
No, they're not doing Ohtani.
I don't see that, but I do see them going to get, whether it's Aaron Nola, there's 2 or 3 Japanese starters that are out there. I think it's Yamamoto was the kid who threw a 138-pitch complete game the other night to win. Whether it's one of those guys, whether it's Aaron Nola, Blake Snell, Cade Horton's coming from their system, I think they have to go out and get a star. They have to have somebody that's on a freaking marquee who is a legitimate superstar, whether that is Pete Alonso, although he's right-handed, whether that is Juan Soto, whether that is Shohei Ohtani, or is there a team out there that says, you know what, we're going to take a step back for a year and we're going to trade like the Cubs traded Darvish a few years ago. We're going to move money off our books. The Cubs will be in line to take anybody.
That's the thing I outlined earlier, Cap. I don't think that team exists this year for the first time in maybe 2 decades, because there's a lot of teams that are looking at that 16 playoff field in each league and looking what the last teams that got in each of the last 2 years have done. And also looking at where their rosters are. A lot of teams that looked like they were rebuilding this year took steps a year ahead of schedule. Diamondbacks certainly were one of those. The Reds were one of those. The Pirates they won 20 games before anybody else in the division did, and they finished pretty strong. Pirates have reason to think that they could be in play with the right move or two and the right piece of development or two between now and then. So, I mean, that's a lot of teams. And the Cardinals have tons of resources they're about to spend on pitching in the offseason. And we know how disappointed they were to miss the playoffs this year. Finished in last place, for God's sake. All the teams in the Central think they can win next year, think they can be in a playoff mix next year. And so that's an example of what's going on league-wide, MLB-wide. And so I don't know how many teams are going to look at this. Maybe they lose out. Maybe some team loses out on some free agents that thinks it needed to get and reassesses by sometime in December. But barring that, I think this is going to be a free-for-all. It's going to be musical chairs like we haven't seen in a long time. And if you're going to make a trade for the bat, you're probably going to have to give up an arm, that kind of thing. And so it's going to be a fascinating winter to watch. And the Cubs should be right, like the epicenter of most of it, quite honestly, because they should be in play for all the top pitchers and any of the top left-handed bats that are available.
One last thing before I ask you about Stroman, and then I'll let you go. I just got a text from somebody at Wrigley. He said, as of noon, it is now 2:00. We're taping this. As of noon, people in Jed's front office did not know he was going to be the new manager. Craig Counsell said Jed got members of the organization together to let them know, I just told David Ross he's being let go, and we're hiring Craig Counsell. He kept it as stealth, as quiet as humanly possible. Crazy.
Yeah, that it doesn't surprise me. That makes all the sense in the world because he was in play with multiple teams. Why would you tell very many people around you that you've got this contingency plan if something falls through with, say, the Mets for Counsell? Why would you tell anybody that's in play? Because all you risk is a leak if it doesn't happen.
Correct.
And now Rossi's twisting in the wind if that's the case. So that's the way to play it. And I'll say, as far as how that got handled, well done.
Well done. All right. Congrats, Jed. He got the media. No one knew. Good for him. Here's the last thing. Marcus Stroman opts out of his deal, which was stunning to people at Wrigley, let alone the fan base. Like,
I was shocked.
I didn't see it coming with the injury history, but he opted out, and he even posted on Instagram and Twitter, hey, I'm out. Good luck. Thanks. I had a great time. Excited to see what's next. What do you think happens to him? And do you think that amount of money will be like oh my God, the Cubs can Hayward's money off the books, Stroman's money off the books. Look out. Everybody's in play.
So the second part first?
Yep.
100%. That's the way I look at it. I mean, what it does is it doubles the Hayward money that you already had coming off of it. Just in that corner of your payroll, it doubles that sort of windfall you were getting anyway from Hayward's money falling off the books. And it's unexpected. So now you're talking, instead of 25 million, you're talking 50 million, roughly 25, roughly 50. And you were already going to push in with a bigger payroll budget. So that absolutely puts everybody in play, which is super important in a marketplace where the numbers probably will get inflated beyond what we think, again, because of all the demand. So keep your eye on that, and that's why they should be in play for anything they want. So that's definitely important, huge. The other thing from where Stroman sits, he's also looking at the high demand in that market. There aren't as many starting pitchers as there are teams that are looking for impact starting pitchers. So once the top tier begins to fall, then he's going to start getting some interest that maybe we didn't see coming in September. And he's going to be able to say, hey, I was an all-star again. I had a weird injury that was a non-arm injury. So, I'm healthy. You don't have to worry about it. And whether he gets 2 years or 5 years, probably something in between, he's probably going to wind up with a guarantee that's more than what he left on the table had he decided to opt in. And the other thing is, he reduces the risk in what would have been a walk year, where he's coming off the injury, and now everything's in play, right? I mean, he risks either a performance dip or another injury, and then he's a free agent because he has to be, and he's got no leverage. So this makes a lot of sense from his standpoint too, even if it was surprising at first blush.
Hey, Gordon.
Yeah. Enjoy it while you can,
Gordon. We're back, baby. We're back.
Hey, just don't forget the other side of that coin with all these teams in on all these players trying to win next year. That's going to make next year's pennant races, playoff races, maybe even more interesting and more hard fought than this year's were. So
I cannot wait. I'm going to get some new Cubs gear today, this afternoon. Hey, man, where are you, by the way?
I'm in Scottsdale, where the GM meetings are at the Omni Resort.
You're at the Omni. Okay, that's what I want to know. It looks beautiful. Enjoy the warm weather. Our best to your family and to your mom. I know you've been out in Seattle some, so we'll talk later in the week as we get more news.
All right. Sounds good, man. Take care. Congratulations, Kap.
Thank you. Here we go. All right. That is an emergency edition of the Cubs Recap Podcast, a presentation of our YouTube channel, The Recap, and available audio only anywhere you get your favorite podcast. For Gordon at the GM meetings, I'm Kap. Cubs hired Craig Counsell. Take that.